Okay, right now it looks like the waiting room in our digital Zoom here is empty. As people come in, we'll enter them as we go. So for the sake of being mindful for everyone's time, we're gonna jump right into the presentation and want to make sure you know we're gonna be leaving time for questions. Would love questions to enter the chat as well throughout. So if you think of a question as we go and something that I say triggers a question, go ahead and type it right into the chat so that everybody can see it and that we can address it. So we can pause periodically throughout the presentation and make sure your questions are answered to the best of our ability. So I'm going to share my screen so I can pull up our presentation for the day and share with you our plan, and then take questions along the way. So thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I know everyone's busy this time of year and there's a lot going on, so I want to thank you for being here very much. The agenda for tonight, I want to go over the process of how we reached today. I want to go over the scope of the program. So we've tried to anticipate some of the frequent questions that you might have, and we're hopeful if we didn't anticipate all of them that you'll ask them this evening. We want to talk about the impact to taxpayers, and we want to leave time for discussion. So to get into our goals for the bond program, the number one thing is to address aging infrastructure and safety needs in the district. And those came about in a facilities assessment that we'll talk about a little bit throughout this presentation. We also wanted to invest in elementary education. A lot of the bond programs that have happened in Allegan Public Schools in the past addressed issues at the high school and sometimes the middle school and some athletics and technology, which is wonderful. But it's time to invest in elementary education. Those buildings have not been addressed in many years. We want to create facilities that'll match our vision for the future, and we want input. We gathered a lot of input to get to today, and if we're optimistic the bond will pass, then there's going to be many opportunities for community input in the future as well. So how did we get here? It started with facilities assessment district-wide over the summer. The buildings were studied. We met with many stakeholders, leadership in the district, teachers in the district, community forums and surveys to get community input. We prioritized some of our needs, and we put together a plan. And that process has been going on for months now, and it helped us design the project and proposal that we're bringing before you on the ballot. So a super exciting opportunity to have $87.5 million investment in our district with no increase to the current millage rate. We'll talk about that a lot as well, but this 7.55 mils number has been in Allegan Public Schools for decades. And all we're going to ask of you is that you keep that number the same. No increase to that number over the time period of the bond. So I want to get into a little bit what might the improvements be. And I'll start from the smallest to the largest numbers. And the first slide here talks about what might happen at our early childhood center, the administration building, the transportation building, and a new district communication system. So the early childhood center, you can see, needs some air conditioning, some security enhancements, definite parking lot improvements, and some mechanical systems. The administration building needs some roofing, some flooring replacements, and some mechanical systems. The transportation building has infrastructure needs as well. And a new district communication system is very important safety feature. It allows us to have what is called E911 capability, where if we ever have to call 911, law enforcement would know to the very room level where that call came from. And that just makes our kids in our buildings more safe. So that's on the list as well. As we get into high school improvements, high school was built quite a few years ago, and we haven't been able to update the interior and the furnishings since then. So we need flexible modern furniture. We need classroom and common spaces to be refreshed. Lighting makes a big deal for learning for our kids, and we would update that. We have athletic surfaces, the football field, the track. We have scoreboards that are in need of replacement. The auditorium, as beautiful as it is, does have some outdated technology for sound and lighting, and it's essential that we maintain that gem in our district to the highest standards. We have some safety and security needs. We need new security cameras to make sure we keep an eye on everything. And we need a new secured entry, and I'll show you an image of that that is exciting. It gives you a sense of what it might look like. Some things that go unseen but are hugely important when it comes to humidity controls for the aquatic center, water heaters, HVAC, boilers. These things go unseen, but they are essential and crucial to a functioning school. And want to show you an image of what a secure vestibule might look like. Those of you that have visited the high school know that once you're buzzed in, you have access to the building. These days, the best idea is to have traffic funneled through the office, but in a way that's still welcoming. We want to be secure, but we want to also be welcoming to the community. And you can see that once you get into the high school, you'd be able to go into the office, be greeted by staff, state your need, your interest in being in the building, and then maybe, if needed, make your way into the building safely. So that image is exciting, and I wanted to show that to you today to give you a sense of what that might look like. Moving on to the middle school improvements, definitely some updated classroom technology. Again, flexible modern furniture. Those of you that have traveled our buildings would walk in and see desks that probably could have been there 40 years ago. I think they might have been there 40 years ago. And those desks and chairs are not the best modern idea for furnishings. We want classrooms that can function in a collaborative group. We want to be able to move tables together and chairs together. We want kids to be comfortable. We want to be able to group and ungroup seamlessly and quickly. And so that's a huge need for us right now, would be the updated furniture throughout the district. Great improvement at the middle school would be the addition of a science wing. This one is near and dear to my heart. I taught science in this district from 1999 to 2005. It was my first job out of college, and obviously I've never left Allegan since, because I and my family, we love it here. But the current classrooms at the middle school that teach science are really not science classrooms. They're traditional classrooms. They don't have lab space. They don't have a lot of glassware, a lot of sinks, a lot of ability to do real science and experiential learning. And it is needed. We have STEM and science careers on the horizon for some of these kids, and they need that opportunity. They deserve that opportunity to have the right facilities at the middle school at that crucial age. We also need updated security cameras there and a secured entry for the middle school. We are very much aware of the community's feelings about the middle school pickup and drop off, and I'll show you an image of how that might be addressed in this model. So that's really important to the community. That's been stated a number of times. And again, some things that are unseen, the HVAC and roofs, really important. And a lot of people in this digital room are also aware of the rich tradition of tennis in the district, and our courts are in need of replacement. We've patched and patched over years, and it's time to redo them and keep that tradition going for Allegan Public Schools. So this image gives you a sense of what the science wing, one of the classrooms, might look like. And the design elements are just exciting. Even to the piping, if you look in the upper right there, you'll see that even the design of the room can be educational, with hot and cold water and the purposes for the infrastructure and how that might help the kids understand what's going on. And it just gets me excited to know that kids could do real science in school, just like they would in the real world. This is one rendering, an idea of what a pickup and drop off improvement might look like. It may not be perfect. It may be difficult to make that facility perfect, but what we need for sure is another outlet. And if we're able to incorporate Goodrich Street into the pickup and drop off situation at the middle school, it would be a pressure release that would be a huge help to that whole situation. We would create a parent loop that would enter in 115th and could exit either on 115th or Goodrich. That would give us another exit that doesn't exist now, which would be awesome. We also would create a bus loop situation that would allow the buses to enter safely on the west side of the lot, and then circle around through what we'll call a service drive bus loop that we're hoping would connect it to our new campus that we'll talk about in a little bit here. That would keep a lot of the bus traffic internal and get it off the roads and in the neighborhoods, and that would be more safe for our walkers as well. So This gives you a sense of where the science wing would be. It gives you a sense of an idea anyway, a rendering of how pickup and drop off might be improved. And then the largest portion of the bond is a learning community for our K-5 students. This facility would have modern technology, infrastructure, furnishings. It would be constructed as really two buildings that are connected by some infrastructure needs that I'll explain in a little bit for efficiency and fiscally responsible design. We would have an upper and a lower elementary with its own playgrounds. We'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like. There's a lot of operational savings we'll talk about. Some much more convenient logistics for parents in terms of pickup and drop off in comparison to our current facilities, and some future potential for our assets that would be our existing sites. And we'll dig into that a little bit this evening as well. So this image just gives you a sense of what it might look like. So you can picture an upper L, on the right and a lower L on the left. And the question would be, why would we connect them? And there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is a common kitchen would be efficient. A common servery area that would be shared could be a benefit for connecting the buildings. HVAC needs would be able to run the building with one mechanical system instead of two, saving a lot of bond dollars. And then if you think about the gymnasium aspect, we could have two good gyms. And then in the event we need to have a presentation or a community member wants to rent our facility, we could open it up into one larger gym. And so this upper L and lower L, connecting them in this way would have a lot of efficiencies in it, which was why the design plan went that direction. I also really like the idea of some upper elementary kids still being able to help and mentor and support the lower elementary kids, and connecting the buildings would help with that as well. So this is an exciting rendering of what it might look like. Getting a little bit deeper into what a wing might look like, you can see that it would have numerous classrooms. It would have some bathroom facilities in each wing. Learning commons, an image I'll show you as well. Some outdoor learning classroom opportunities, which are hugely exciting to get kids experiencing some outdoor education. Some locker and common areas where they would be able to store their belongings. And some small group rooms too that would allow for some small group intervention. And one of the questions that's come up a lot in the community is the sense that they might be concerned that the building might be too big and impersonal. And if you think about each wing carrying all the first graders and having that be a family and a community that would be together, and then they would age together as second graders, creating that family feel as they age. Each wing would be sort of its own grade level family, and I think it would still offer that very personal touch and environment that we're looking for our kids. Each wing would have something called a learning commons, and if you just look at it, I just get excited about the opportunities for reading, for small group intervention, for some maybe enrichment groups that could happen out there. Some rooms that would be for some small meetings or intervention off on the back, and outside there, that's where an outdoor classroom would be at each wing. And some books, and just makes you feel like reading and learning. And I got pretty excited when I saw that rendering from our architect, and it's a great image. Of course, a major question is, well, where would this go? And we knew about this parcel of land behind the middle school for years, this 90-acre parcel. And you always, as a district, have to look at land that's adjacent to your existing property, and for a reason maybe like this in the future. So we were aware of that parcel, and when the community forums and surveys indicated that this was the direction that we wanted to go, we engaged in a conversation with the property owner in terms of, if the bond passes, would they be willing to sell that to us? And the answer was yes. We have an agreement with them that if the bond passes, we will purchase the property. And if the bond does not pass, then we won't. So we don't have a commitment unless the bond passes, which I think is a responsible place to be in this situation. So that would be the proposed site. And we'll get into a little bit how traffic flow may look in that site as well. So this is just an idea, but it gives you a sense of, how many entrances and exits to that property exist, which is enough for the traffic flow that would exist. This property goes all the way out to 34th Street. It goes to Sunset. There's a piece that comes out on Sherman Street. And then there's another piece, actually not in the current routing, but could be, that goes out near the Goodrich Academy corner. And you can see that the internal bus loop would exist, and it would provide a very convenient and very safe pickup and drop off situation compared to some of the struggles we have now at all of our sites. And it brings up the question about, why do this at all in terms of what's the benefit of consolidating to one space? And there's many actually, and I want to talk about them. One of them is student services. And that, what I mean by that is we have a lot of traveling people. We have speech paths and occupational therapists and psychologists, and sometimes our specialist teachers, PE, art, music, and tech. They all travel from one building to another, and that's not very efficient for servicing our students. Our at-risk staff does the same. It'd be great if we could have all that human resources in one building to support our kids. Class sizes can be very difficult to determine in a model where you're spreading out your population among 3 buildings. And the class sizes then would be dependent upon how many kids at a certain grade level happen to live in a certain neighborhood. And I'll talk about that a little bit next. Parent and family engagement. We have some powerful parent-teacher organizations that I can only imagine if they combined forces, how amazing it would be from a fundraising and teacher support standpoint. So I'm really excited about the family engagement possibilities for a new site. Operational efficiencies we've talked about a little bit, but think about the utility savings and building upkeep and maintenance and groundskeeping and security monitoring. All of those things would be a financial benefit for us to combine our services in that way. Educational equity is really important to me. I want all kids in our district to have the same opportunities, extracurricular being one of them. But another one is some of our special education facilities are housed in one of our buildings. And if you're a student at a different building that has those needs, you have to move. You have to uproot yourself and your family to go to a different school. Now that school is great and it's welcoming and it always works out, but it always feels a little bit like, wouldn't it be great if we could provide that service at each site? And this would allow us to do that and let our students with disabilities that have some special needs stay with their friends, with their school. I think that's really important. A grade center model provides for teacher collaboration at a very high level. Right now, 3rd grade teachers are spread out among multiple buildings, and it's hard for them to talk. It's hard for them to compare curriculum and methodology. If they're all in the same building, they'd have collaborative opportunities that we just don't have right now. That would be huge. I've heard a lot about food quality from our elementary parents and the hope that that could be improved. And in this model, it would be improved greatly. Right now, all the food has to be cooked at Allegan High School and then trucked over and put under warmers. And it's just not, we can do better. And so I think this would actually have really good kitchen facilities that would allow our kids to have better nutrition. And that's exciting. And we all have heard the competition that sometimes is perceived between the elementary schools. Some perceive some better than others. And to know that we're just all tigers and that we all can be together and age together, and that kids can be in class with their friends from baseball and basketball that, they maybe go to different elementary schools now, they could be together. I'm excited about that opportunity for our kids. So let me give you a little bit more of a granular example of why class sizes are really tough in our current model. This is getting into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's important for you to know why this factor is important to us. So right now, as we speak, as we sit here, we have 4th graders, at Dawson. If you happen to go to Dawson, we have 2 sections with 20 and 17 kids each. We have 2 sections at Pine, but look how large those are at 29 each, and 1 at West at around 26 each. And these are approximates, they can change, but this is roughly where we are right now. If you take that number of students, the average should be 24 students per section, and we can't get there. And so there's some inequities just based upon the fact that you happen to live in one neighborhood versus another. And in a grade center model allows us to achieve what we would call the true average of what class sizes should be for that grade. A hypothetical example And this is actually one that's happened. If you imagine a cohort of first graders, let's say, that has 150 students in it, well, that should for us be 6 teachers at 25 students each. But they're never distributed cleanly and evenly in our lives. And that often can lead to, maybe most of those kids are at Pine and we have to have 3 teachers there. And maybe a middle amount is at Dawson and we have to have 2. And a small number is at West and we have to have 2, even though they're small. Well, that leads to us having 7 teachers when we really only need 6. And if that happens at multiple grade levels, that cost can really add up. And we really need to be in a way where as kids age through, we know exactly how many teachers we need, and we're fiscally responsible with that. And we can actually just shift teachers around to make that happen, instead of having a teacher shortage to go out and try to find more, which we may not really need. So that's a little bit granular, but I think it's important that you know in our distribution right now how difficult it is for us to get that right. So into some FAQs a little bit. One of the main ones was, why not renovate? Why not do that instead of this? And we did talk about that extensively when we made this proposal. We talked about it throughout the summer and fall about what that would look like. And we're committed to a grade center model. We're really excited about that. And we knew we couldn't have 3 buildings in a grade center model in which somebody might have a first grader at one, a third at another, and a 5th grader at another, and really expect a parent to travel around to 3 different buildings to pick up and drop off their kids. That's not something that we knew would be well accepted at all. Even if we tried it in 2 buildings, we'd have to renovate them very heavily at a very big expense. And we'd still be left with some old bones. Those buildings would still be old with some new parts. And that is concerning to us when, if you look on the right, you can see that the cost of that was almost identical. And so you might think to yourself, well, why wouldn't we attempt to recoup some of those efficiencies of building new and what that environment might look like and do for our kids for the same amount of money? And so that was important to us. We also had to think about something called swing space. And if you're really going to heavily renovate a building, those kids have to go to school somewhere else temporarily while we do that. We don't really have that swing space. We don't have anywhere for them to go. So we talked a lot about renovation, and overwhelmingly in the surveys, the new building idea was by far the community's choice. So to get into, again, why one building? We think it's the best use of taxpayer dollars. We know it'll feel like 2 buildings with some connection for the reasons we talked about before. We talked about the gym spaces that could be, small or big depending on the need. The upper L helping the lower L kids would still be there. The playgrounds would still be separate, though, to create that playground separation. It would still feel like a community. Families would not have to travel to multiple buildings to get their kids, other than, of course, if they were at the middle or high school, which would still be the same, but you'd be relatively close to them. And this was the choice. This was the choice of the community when we brought it to them. Another big question we answered a lot is, well, what will happen to the existing buildings? It's a great question. Well, we've already shown ourselves to be creative in our repurposing. We knew that the Early Childhood Center at Northward would be successful, but we now know that for sure with 120 students receiving care at Little Tigers and curriculum-based care at that. And we knew that would be a huge need in our community, but that has come to fruition. We have some scenarios with the old buildings that give us some options. So our option A would be to sell the buildings to fulfill a community need. And there's some preliminary conversations that we've engaged with that people might have some interest in. We have time to address that, as the new building would not be built and kids would not be going to school there and at the earliest until the fall of 2025. And so that gives us a lot of time to engage the community with the needs of those spaces and those buildings. We do have a last resort as well, and that's to raise the buildings and return them to green space, because we are committed to not leaving blighted, empty buildings. That is not good for a neighborhood. It's not good for a community. So that's not on the list. And so we think we can they can be attractive to some people in the community, but we have a backup plan in the event that they're not right away. Another question that was asked, and sorry for all the words, but it's important to talk about, how might this actually raise student achievement? So if that's what we're really all about, then what would this do for that? So we've talked about the grade center model and teacher collaboration. No question, teacher methodology improves when they collaborate in that way. Student achievement will follow. Improved services we've talked about tonight as well, that those adults would all be present and collaborating in the same building and not spread out over multiple buildings. Talked a little bit about furnishings, and this would be K-12, about how important it is now for collaborative spaces and for kids to be able to flexibly move in and out of different groupings. Huge benefit to the learning environment, and we could present anyone with some research about how something maybe as simple as furniture can make a big educational difference, and it's more powerful than people might think. New construction must have natural lighting in the classrooms, and there's studies also about how that impacts student achievement of our kids, and we could share those with anyone if they were interested. We also know that art and music improve student achievement in math and reading. And right now, we do not have art and music rooms that are independent. They're all shared. And imagine if we had their own spaces, what they could do. It would be pretty exciting. Technology is always helpful for education, and this process would allow us to have modern technology throughout the entire district. Environmental factors like air quality is also huge for learning. And anytime you can make modern air handling equipment, you improve the air quality, which improves learning outcomes for kids. So having some outdoor options for some experiential learning has been shown to increase student achievement. And anytime you save money operationally, that money becomes available to pump into other programs in the district. So those are just a preliminary list of how student achievement might be improved with the bond proposal. And we're to the point where we're going to talk a little bit about the tax impact. And I can't see all the people on my screen right now, so if Amy Chrisman is here, I would turn this part over to her to present some of the tax impact information.
Yep. So what this slide shows is a snapshot of what the mills necessary to be levied for what our existing debt is, and what that looks like moving forward over the next 20 years. Districts are only allowed to levy the amount of mills necessary to meet existing voter approved debt. And so what's happening is as our debt payments start to drop off, the amount of mills we will be levying without extension of this current 7.55 mills would begin to drop off. And then as you see in 2041 would eventually drop off to zero. So by voting to approve or extend the 7.55 mills would keep that rate steady and therefore generate over the course of a three bond series issue, the $87.5 million. So I don't know if there's any questions on that or so what this shows is just a snapshot as well of our surrounding districts and the amount of mills that they are currently levying for debt only. As you can see, we're on the lower side of that average. I think James may have some information to add to this slide as well. So.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, this is a good snapshot of where we are in comparison to our neighbors. And going back to the previous slide, the 7.55 mills number has been very kind to Allegan Public Schools and very well supported by our community. We were able to renovate the high school back in the early to mid 90s with that number. We've been able to do the pool in the auditorium. We've been able to do the field house and the technology as we talked about before. And so that number, the 7.55, and I can't take any credit for this. The district has done so well and has been so fiscally responsible that we haven't had to ask the voters for any increase in that number for decades. And we're not asking for any increase to that number now. We're just asking if that's a comfortable number that we can accomplish so much with it that you'd be willing to continue to do that over a longer period of time. I think we compare nicely to our neighbors. I know some neighbors have recently passed some bonds, and we can't ignore the fact that schools of choice is legal. And if other districts surrounding us have facilities that are modernized, that a family simply could drive down the road and attend that school, we need to make sure that our facilities are what our kids need, and they deserve it, to be honest. So the kids of our community would benefit greatly from this over a very long period of time. Then you start to think about the community as a whole. And, not everybody here in Allegan has a connection to the school. We're a very large employer in the district, but not everybody in this room probably and in the community has children in school or grandchildren in school. And they might wonder, how might this impact them if they're going to vote for it? And we have a number of reasons for that as well. We certainly want to attract and retain students, but our community benefits by having a workforce live here and go to school here that could work at the downtown businesses and work at Parago, and have the schools that would draw them here and make life better for everybody. And home values are inevitably positively impacted by quality school facilities. And in a town our size, the school is a hub of the community, and all you have to do is attend back when we, pre-COVID homecoming parade, to know how powerful the impact of Allegan Public Schools is on the community as a whole. And thankfully, we'll be back to being able to do those types of events, hopefully very soon. So the whole community pride aspect of, good communities build, good schools, and good schools help build strong communities. And that investment in the community benefits every citizen of Allegan, regardless of whether or not you have a child or a grandchild in school. So some polling information for you. The polls, the vote is May 4th, and your polling location is where you would go to vote. Many people, due to the convenience and or the pandemic, are absentee voting, and there's links to that as well. And this presentation it's being recorded, and it will be put on the website, so you can access those links to make sure that you can, do that if that's a route you would like to take for your voting. And I wanted to share that with you as well, so that you could make sure that you get registered if you're not, and you know how to vote. We really need people to get out there, despite some of the conditions that we're all dealing with. So that's a lot of information, and it was given probably relatively quickly. So want to pause. We've reached the end of the actual presentation. I want to pause and open the floor for some questions if people want to put them in the chat, or if people want to out loud unmute themselves temporarily and ask a question. We tried to anticipate your needs, but we really would like you to, if you do, to be able to ask your question if you have it at this time. And I guess I'll ask some of my colleagues if there's anything in the chat that maybe I missed. Please feel free to make sure I'm aware of that, so I don't neglect anyone's question or move forward without answering that. Okay, I want to give some wait time to make sure, but I'm not hearing any community questions. I'm not seeing any in the chat. So I think we've probably gone to a point where it feels like maybe there just aren't any, and that's okay too. I'm going to be available to you all via email, phone call. I'm happy to meet with people. I really want to make sure that people have the accurate information to make the best choice for them. And so I want to make myself available to you all at any time to make sure that we're all here for our kids.
Mr. Antoine, we did have a couple questions pop up in the chat.
Oh, great. You want to give them to me so I don't have to stop sharing my screen maybe?
Yep. The first one was from Scott. He just wondered, is the conceptual design what we will be seeing? So Maybe clarify that those pictures are just kind of renderings of what it could potentially look like.
Yep, that's a great question, and I might ask for a little bit of help from our friends from Tower Pinkster and our friends from Chrisman. And in this rendering, if this is the one we're talking about, I can look at some of the others as well, if they are the ones. I'll let maybe Sean Parshall. I introduce Sean. Thank you for being here from Tower Pinkster. Talk a little bit about maybe the conceptual nature and what might happen from a design standpoint moving forward.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. In the bond planning phase, we try to understand the overall goals and objectives, and we try to come up with a solution graphically that demonstrates that. At this stage in the game, it's meant merely as a concept expressing these ideas that we've heard. Upon a successful passage, what will happen is we'll re-engage with many of the stakeholders that we talked to early on to help us shape some of these ideas and goals and objectives and really dive into much more detailed design. So an example would be, we really want that smaller sense of community. So what you're seeing as Mr. Antoine expressed is a compartmentalization of this building into smaller communities. How that happens, that could happen in a number of different ways. This was really just meant as an initial idea of showing how that could happen. So we often talk in many of the districts that we work with that at this point in time in the pre-bond planning phase, we're really doing about 5% of the overall design. Really, we've got 95% of design time yet to go, but that happens after a bond is passed.
Thank you, Sean. It's a really good question. Rob, you said there might be some other questions in the chat as well.
Yeah. Another question was, how are we getting this information out to people in the community? This person feels that there is a disconnect between people that have kids in the school and those who don't.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair statement. It is easier for us to communicate with people that are connected to us with kids. We have them in our school messenger system and therefore have all their emails and their phone numbers. And when we use our system to blast things out, that is how easy it is to get information to people now in comparison to what it was maybe when I was a kid. So we tried to do some other things. We sent some postcards to the neighborhood, the Sherman Street neighborhood and surrounding area, and invited them to a virtual meeting because we wanted to just be good neighbors. We know that if we build a building there in that land, that it would impact them, and we wanted to make sure we talked to them. So we sent them all postcards, and a lot of you have probably received the Our Schools at this point, which is our school publication, and that goes to every single mailbox in the entire district, whether you have kids or not. So that was another way we tried to reach people. And we also have people on a different committee, which would be an advocacy committee, reaching out to people as well, separate from the school, a group of supportive parents and community members that want to advocate for passage of the bond. So there's some avenues that we've tried there. The social media piece is something we use often as well to make sure these forums and things are known. But we also know that not everybody engages in social media, so it's just one of our layers of communication. So we would welcome feedback on that, whether it's to email me or to put something additionally in the chat. If anyone, a community member in this room, wants to make sure there's as many ways as possible. I know there's going to be an article in the Allegan County News as a way to reach more people, some letters to the editor. So we're trying to tackle and tap into as many communication avenues as we can. But that's a fair question. I do think it's easier for us to reach people directly connected with us.
And one more question was, what happens if the bond doesn't pass? Where do we go from there?
Really good question. One we should think about, and we have had some preliminary discussions about that. And the way I'll explain it is, it may depend on how close we work. And so I guess what I mean by that is, if for some reason this doesn't pass by or it doesn't go, and it's just a very small amount of votes, we might consider the fact that, people didn't not like the idea, but we didn't get very good turnout. Maybe pandemic related turnout issues. Maybe people didn't, take the time to do the mail-in voting, and then they didn't feel like that day they felt like they could go to the polls. So we're going to have to do some work to see, did people not like the idea, or if it's, a defeat that would be more devastating. It might kind of tell us that maybe the idea that we crafted with the community for the community, maybe isn't the one that is supported by the majority of the community. And we'd have to think about that. So we would kind of base that next step, and someone else feel free to chime in part based upon the results and our feedback based on how the results, how they happen in the end. Anything additional from the team on that one? No. The infrastructure needs are there, and so the part that would be concerning is if the bond were not to pass, we still have roofs and boilers and parking lots and HVAC systems, and the sad part is we are not funded generally based on our pupil count in a way that allows a district to tackle a lot of big capital projects in the manner in which we might. And so what that means is that those things that are necessities must come from the general fund, which in my opinion takes away from from kids. And so we're hopeful that people look at the totality of the proposal, and if they like pieces of it, that they understand that, if they maybe don't like an aspect of it, that they maybe still can support the proposal for the things they do like, and the fact that it would help us fulfill those needs for kids. So, we know that it's not going to please everyone, but we hope people look at it from that broader perspective to help us do the right thing for our students.
Gail had a question about how she perceives that the school population has steadily declined over the years that she's been a resident in Allegan, and was just wondering if a projection for the future school population has been done to determine what things might look like 10 years down the road.
Yeah, great question. And it's actually legally part of the bond process. So there's a company that does that work, and they're called Middle Cities, and we've engaged with them for years, and we had to re-engage with them for this process. So what we have to do is create an application at some point that we send to the Treasury Department at the state. And so going back to the summer, we created the proposal. We had to craft this application to the state, and part of that application to the state needed to include the enrollment projections as well. So the state does not like to approve these projects if your enrollment projections do not make sense for what you're trying to do. And so the process, Gail, that you're describing is part of the bond process, and it's really good that you asked that. Our projection does have us shrinking a bit over the next, I think, 5 years, and Amy Chrisman can help me with this. And then we start to move positively in the right direction. And again, these are projections after around that 5 or 6 year period from now. We've talked a lot with the architects about this as well, in terms of building a building that can be accommodating to growth. And with 7 sections per wing right now, the size of the projected building would be very appropriate for now, and leave room for pretty decent growth at each grade level if that were to happen. Anything to add there, Amy? I think I probably stole your thunder a bit there.
No, I think you summarized it quite well. So
thank you.
I just want to add that we have used this company for many years. And when I go back and compare actual numbers, actual bodies in our classrooms to the projections, they're pretty darn close. So their numbers are usually pretty accurate. Although all with COVID this year, I don't know about everyone else, but there's a lot of babies being born right now. And so in 5 years, that truly, all joking aside, may have an effect on our enrollment. So
we would consider that a good thing. We definitely, we definitely need some more kids, and would welcome that boom.
So,
Anything else, Rob, in the chat that might be something we should talk about?
Sarah had a question, and then there was another question just about concerns with traffic. Sarah's question would be, if this passes, would the newer playground equipment get moved from the other buildings to the new building, or would there be new equipment installed there?
Good question. And I might need a little help again from Sean, because it might be a little bit of both. And it also might depend upon who might have interest in our existing current buildings. And potentially then the playground should stay. If they're depending on who might have interest, that neighborhood playground might be best to stay where it's at. But I'll let Sean chime in a little bit about maybe how that's worked in the past and with other districts.
Yep. So exactly as you mentioned, James, if there's a future use that would benefit from the playground equipment staying at the current facility, we would certainly entertain that. However, if that's not in the cards, what would happen is we have a landscape architect on staff who evaluates the safety conditions relative to the current safety requirements for playground equipment. So we would do an inventory of that and determine what would be appropriate to move over. And obviously there's been investment there, and we want to respect that and make sure that, you know, the investments that have been made are able to be preserved. And we've done that many times where we've salvaged and reinstalled equipment from one facility as it moves to a new facility.
It's a really good question that we haven't had that question very often, so I appreciate that being asked.
And then the other question was about just traffic problems on Sherman. Basically, if the new school would create more of a, I guess, a log jam of cars on Sherman there.
Yep, another very good question. And actually, we feel that this design would alleviate a lot of our traffic issues that currently exist. If you've been at Westward in the morning or the pickup, we have the cars lined up and down Vernon Street, sometimes not leaving a lot of room for traffic to even travel in the middle. And I know that they've worked on that. They've worked on trying to train the parents to do one thing. That doesn't always work. Same issues at Dawson with a very tight site plan there. The Dawson pickup and drop off, particularly with not as many kids busing as they used to, has gotten significantly problematic this year. So what we think, and again, I might ask for some design help since I'm not an architect, but what I think would be that because we have a large site, that we can definitely get enough space to efficiently load all of those vehicles in the upper L and then the lower L, where they would be able to be in the site per se, as opposed to lined up on Sherman Street causing any backups. So I'll hand off a little bit to Sean to get into more detail, but that stacking space, we call it, with cars being sort of stacked, is part of the design process. And one more thing I'll say before I turn it over to Sean is there are multiple outlets to this property, which will assist us greatly. Instead of, for example, Pine Trails having only one outlet to Bridge Road, this would have multiple outlets to different areas, which would be hugely helpful as well. So I'll hand the rest of this over to Sean.
Yeah, you hit pretty much all of it though, James. I think when we do get into the design phase, the image that you're seeing on the screen right now, it's again very diagrammatic in nature, just showing some concepts. But either the areas that are identified by the red arrows or by the yellow arrows for the buses, those will become much more detailed. We'll study how much lineal footage of that stacking space that Mr. Antoine mentioned, how much capacity we can work into the site. And that is really what we try to do. We try to accommodate as much as we can on the site. And I do think the big differentiator with this site is the number of outlets that are dispersing traffic to and from the site. So you're not creating that singular entry and exit. Those are the biggest issues that we see on most sites, is that there's just not enough outlet.
Thank you for that, help on that one. It's a good question as well. So I appreciate these coming in. Anything else going into the chat, Rob, that we can help with?
No, not at this point.
Okay.
Scott just offered a comment saying picking up at the middle school currently has cars backed up to Templin's parking lot. Kids are also
Yes.
trying to cross at Sherman in the traffic flow. Would you consider moving the crosswalk west to the other side of that intersection?
Yeah, we may, and that could be part of the design process as well. The current setup with the diagonal sidewalk that leads from the middle school to Tiger Trail, because we know a lot of kids do cross that to either meet up with their high school sibling or vice versa. We also usually stage the buses at one location or the other, and right now they're staged at the middle school, which means the high school kids walk over and they use Tiger Trail to cross. So whether or not that crosswalk is good to move it would depend a lot about some other logistical things in the district that we would plan differently. So that is going to be part of the look and the design to see if there's a safer way we can pull that off. I appreciate the comment because I was principal of the building at the middle school for 6 years, and really concerned me some of the traffic flow in and out, and that's one of the priorities of the bond is to try to fix that. So again, a lot of design will go into it before the finalization of the actual project, but that is a very good comment, and I appreciate it very much.
James, if I could add maybe just one other comment. As we do get into that design process, we know that this is a concern. So this is, as we move into that, we can engage a traffic engineer to understand the broader context of how traffic movement is happening within the city so that we understand the impacts. Again, I think the number of outlets that we're creating off of this site will be significant, but we want to really understand how that plays out in the broader context.
Thank you.
And Sarah was wondering about playgrounds, if it's being considered to have them fenced in for safety. Yep.
They are actually. That is something that's in the design. We don't want to make people think that means they can't use them in terms of like after hours. We know that people use our current playgrounds, in the evenings and the summers, and they would be fenced in, but we also want people to know that they can still be used. We're hopeful for play fields and maybe some basketball courts. We're hopeful to make that a really pretty special area that people could participate in even outside of school, as we want to be a good neighbors as well. So I like that question. I appreciate it. There are days I wish our current playgrounds were fenced in. So I think moving forward in the design, that is absolutely the way to go.
That appears to be it for questions.
Well, those were really good ones. So I'm appreciative of those that did that. It really helps us clarify what's on people's minds. And those of you in the room, spread the word that we want to answer these questions. We want you to engage with us. And as that grassroots word of mouth happens, and people want to email or call me, or if I don't have the answer, I will definitely get you with someone who might know a little bit more about what you're trying to ask. So thank you all so very much for being here and taking the time out of your evening. This will be available on the website. It'll be a recording, so you can watch it again or have your friends watch it. So I appreciate it very much for you taking the time, and we'll go ahead and sign off, and I wish everyone a very